Shalom, everyone. Welcome back to the Marriage Molecule. It's been a couple weeks. So we are actually continuing communication. Who remembers what we talked about the last time we met? Who was listening to the teaching last time? Hint, hint. Oh, okay. How we listen. Yes, listening. It was the whole teaching because that's such an important part of communication is learning how to listen. So this afternoon, we're going to have the second part, stumbling blocks to communication, two of them, nonverbal messages, personality differences. Now, they're only stumbling blocks if we allow them to be stumbling blocks, all right? So we want to keep in mind that in every communication, whether it's public communication, whether it's your private with your spouse or a friend or a coworker, all these things are going on, all right? So these are all good principles to keep in mind no matter where we are and who we are communicating with or with whom we're communicating, all right? So we're going to start, first of all, with the tone of voice. But before I do that, let me give you a little bit of some background here. Because tone of voice is something, particularly I think couples tend to ignore. Sorry. Right? Okay. And we say a lot with our tone of voice, don't we? Right? But because we tend to ignore it when we're communicating with our spouses, we forget that it is about 93% of our message is in our tone of voice. Right, okay? Yeah, he's going to remember that next time all right. The closer the relationship, the stronger the desire to be understood. So, husband and wife, very close relationship. So there's a very strong desire, hopefully on both parts, to connect and to be understood. To understand our spouses, you have to focus on these nonverbal messages, all right? Because we are continually speaking even though we're not speaking. So we're I can't do that. I can't say that. Please don't make me stay here. Oh my gosh. Thank you. He said, he's the camera guy, he said I could. What communication was that? Right? Did I communicate? I didn't say a word, but I communicated, right? This is what this whole lesson is going to be about. So, we use our body language, tone of voice, and of course, facial expressions. We're going to be talking about each one of those. So, our tone of voice. Keep in mind, yelling and screaming really isn't beneficial. If we're at the point where we're yelling and screaming, communication's long done, right? You might as well just stop because it's not going to get you anywhere, right? Loud voices are usually perceived as aggressive. Now, some people seem to have a natural loud voice, and if they increase it at all, it really can come across as being pretty intimidating. So some people really have to kind of watch their own voice a little bit, depending on who they're communicating with, like a little child, spouse, whatever. Okay. High-pitched voices are usually associated with nervousness or tenseness. But again, some people just have a higher pitched voice naturally. But as it becomes higher and higher, it's either more anxiety, nervousness, or stress. Soft voices, normally associated with politeness or timidity. Okay? Somebody who's maybe shy, just quiet-natured, they tend to have a little softer voice. Words represent only 7% of our message, while what we say, or how we say it, I should say, our tone of voice represents 38%. Our voice is a gift from God, just like the rest of our body is a gift from God. He gave us our voices, so we should never be using them as a weapon, all right? They are a tool. Tone of voice, simply tone of voice, can cause misunderstandings, hurt feelings, arguments, right? Because of how we're saying something rather than what we are saying. Because what we are saying is getting lost in the how we are saying it, right? So we're not communicating at all. So it's important that couples learn each other's voice idiosyncrasies. We all have them, so that you're learning your spouse. And if your spouse is getting really, 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 really quiet, it should say something to you. It should open your eyes to something or clue you in that maybe your spouse is getting really withdrawn, tense, nervous, anxious. And on the other hand, if they're getting louder and louder, somebody in the couple needs to say, we need to dial this down, or we need to take a break, or, before it gets to the point where both people are screaming. How many of you know, simply by your spouse's tone of voice, that they're out of sorts? Just one? Oh, you don't know? You don't know when he's out of sorts? Just by his tone of voice? Well, sure you do. Men should be aware how threatening or hostile sometimes their voice, their sternness can come across or can be perceived by their wives and their children. And we women need to be aware of how irritating our high-pitched voices can be on other people, particularly our spouses. And they can come across as really whiny and just plain irritating. So we want both spouses to keep voices that are uplifting, keep them under control when they're speaking to each other. Like I said, these are principles that will help everybody, even outside of the marriage. All right, so let's look at body language. And this is a complex topic. It can also be misinterpreted. Like, somebody could be sitting here like this, and you think they're bored, but maybe they're just really, really tired. Interpreting body language has to also, if you do it accurately, has to be taken in context with the person, what you know already about the person. The person you marry should be the one you know the best. So you would understand some of the body languages, maybe from the culture they grew up in. My husband's family, everybody talked at the same time. It just would, no, they did. They just sat and they were all talking. I'm like, I just felt like I could never get a word in edgewise. That was just them. So knowing those kind of things helps in the understanding of why somebody's constantly interrupting you. That's how they kind of grew up. They just talk, even when you're talking. Every person has their own unique, if you will, type of body language, gestures to signify certain feelings. About 55% of the messages that we speak is encased in our body language. So that's why we want to focus on that. We don't want to just focus on what the person's saying, but how they are saying it, right? What gestures are they using? Some people use their hands a lot, right? Constantly. That's just part of how they express themselves. Other people, they don't. Remember this, if Hasatan, our enemy, can keep us from communicating effectively, he's won. He's won. That's why we spent 2 sessions on just communication, because it is a huge issue in relationships. All right, so let's talk a little bit about gestures. Gestures can either be open or closed. Let's start with some of the open, so-called open gestures, like open hands. If I stand with my husband and my palms are up, or he has a button jacket, he's a man, and I'm going in for an interview or something, he starts to unbutton his jacket, that just shows that he's more open, more approachable. There's this spontaneous eye contact. Now, what do I mean by that? Spontaneous eye contact. It's not a matter of a stare down, right? It's using the eyes to communicate to the person that you are listening, you're hearing them, you're engaging with them, connecting with them with your eyes. A smile. Don't we feel like we can go and approach somebody who's smiling a lot easier than we can approach somebody who is frowning or has a scowl on their face, right? Leaning forward while the person is talking also demonstrates that you are interested in what they're saying, rather than standing back like this. Having a relaxed stance. You're not rigid. You don't have both hands on your hips and that kind of thing. It's just relaxed. All of that helps the communication flow a little more freely. Hands away from the face. Uncrossed legs. Like if you're sitting and your legs are crossed, it could mean a couple of things. One, it's a comfortable position. A lot of people cross their legs because it's comfortable when they're sitting, men and women, right? So you want to take in more than just one gesture and try to arrange your communication style around that. So if the person is sitting with crossed legs like this or leaning back, maybe they're not too open to what it is you're saying. So these are things that you would look at together, not just individually. Touching. Come here, I want to touch you. Okay. Touching. Now, touching is a touchy subject, because in some cultures, touching can be offensive, particularly between a man and a woman that aren't married to each other, right? But we're talking within the marital unit. We're talking about that. If I say, hey, how are you doing? Like, that kind of touching, that pat. No pun intended. No pun intended. That's I'm open. How are you? I'm interested what he has to say, right? A welcoming handshake, eye contact. Those are all ways that show the speaker or indicates to the speaker that you are listening and hearing and open to what they are saying. Okay, let's see, where am I here? I think I went ahead one. All right. Even those head nods, somebody's talking to you and they're going like, the listener's going like this, that means they're hearing you, they're engaged with you. Body position toward the speaker, talked about that a few minutes ago. Leaning in toward the speaker. Now, no, that's not necessarily what a married couple would necessarily do in an everyday normal conversation, but if you think about it, we're probably doing it without even realizing it. Like, hey, how's your day? You know, a lot of these things are involuntary, and we're so used to doing them we don't realize it. So we want to bring out more of an awareness that these are some techniques that can clue your spouse in that you are hearing them. Okay. That's the closed. I mean the open. Now for the closed. A hand covering the mouth. And of course, making fists. Like this guy. Does he look approachable? What? What do you mean by the hand covering the mouth? What does that give you? Right? Okay. Now, he not only has his fists up, there's other facial expressions, all of it. Eyes gives you the idea this man is what? He's angry, right? You may not want to tell him bad news right now. Okay? All right. What about peering over top of glasses?
You can't see.
Like you're doing. See? It takes more than just the one thing. I can't look at Harold and think, oh, he's not even listening. He's not even interested, because he is peering over his glass. But I know him. He does that. A lot of people do. If that's something your spouse does on a regular basis, then you need to take that into consideration, that it doesn't have any particular meaning. It's just an idiosyncrasy, something that they just do. Glancing at the exit or the watch while they're talking, right? What does that portray? Or the TV. Anything that's taking your eyes away from that person is giving them the indication you don't want to hear what they have to say, or you're really not all that interested. Frowning. That has a lot of power, a frown. Because it could mean, like, I'm confused. I'm not sure I know what you mean. Or it can mean, I've heard this before. Leaning back, trying to put distance between you. A rigid stance, which we talked about. Hands on hips. There. How about that? Even babies, right, can communicate really well. They know how to scowl. They know how to frown, right? And we know exactly that baby is angry, upset about something, right? How about constantly looking at the floor when you're talking? Now, again, you have to know your person, because if your spouse, your fiance, is looking at the floor while you're talking, maybe he or she is just very shy or has low self-esteem, right? And so you need to, that's why we need to know each other. Moving away, we talked about legs crossed. Locked ankles, same way. You could be sitting, maybe not have your legs crossed, but your ankles are locked and crossed. How about folded arms? Can you hold this for a second? All right. Women especially find this to be a comfortable stance, okay? And kind of, a lot of women, just me included, just kind of stand this way. But it could mean, right? Or tapping the foot with it, right? I'm impatient. I'm tired of what you're saying. Get on with it. Again, not good open communication gestures. No, yeah. You're talking, but the palm's open, but they're tapping, right? They're not listening. Wringing of hands. Again, that could be somebody who's just nervous. It could be a sign of low self-esteem. Or it could be a sign of real anxiety and stress. Head lowered, we talked about that a little bit. The lack of eye contact. Now, I don't know about you, but I've noticed in this day and age, a lot of people don't give you eye contact that much anymore. But again, we're talking about in the marital situation, okay? We should be able to have good eye contact when we're communicating. Because if I'm looking over here at the TV or anything else, we talked about that, I'm not going to seem to him that I'm listening or understanding or even care what he is saying. Okay, you're up.
Another of the nonverbal communication is distance. And distance is much more important than we think it is. It's another way to communicate between ourselves and others. And there's actually a lot of study that's going on with distance. And it's important to understand these things. The amount of study that's going on is actually called proxemics. And it's human nature to understand there's a certain amount of space that surrounds us, and some of us consider a certain amount of space as being ours. We own that space. There was a movie that they had said in the dancing that this is my space and this is your space. And that's sort of the way we view our space. And most people call it our territory or our space. And this amount varies between different people. So you need to understand who you are talking to and who that space is. And I think you have slide 21. Yeah, okay. So there is what we call, and this is all measured, a space between 0 and 18 inches. And that 0 is what they call intimate space. That's for sexual intimacy. And that's where you permit this person to go into that very special place. And that between that and 18 inches is where the marriage molecule would be more applicable. And then the next step up is 18 inches to 4 feet. Now, that is what we call personal space. Now, once you're into that, that's where your intimacy is still valid there, but you're not really in the sexual range anymore. Usually that's reserved for your personal friends and your spouse, but it's more you're into casual conversation as well. So your friends are in there, your family's in there, you know, you're within your 4 feet. Excuse me. Then there's what we call the public space. And they say that is between the 4 feet and the 12 feet.
No, that's social.
Okay. Oh, wait. Okay. Social, 4 feet and 12 feet. That's the social space. So that's where you're now in the more impersonal. That's where you're in business, you're in work, your boss. And we feel safe with those people, but they're still not like part of your family. They're not in the personal area. And then the next level up is what we call the public. And that's anything above 12 feet. And it's important to understand this, not so much in the measurement, but in how you handle people. So the public area is where we do public speaking. This is what happens when we get behind Bubba. We're in the public space now, or we're in the Torah study, or we're trying to teach a lesson, or whatever. This is when people start getting nervous, because now we're no longer in the sexual range, we're no longer in the personal range, we're no longer even in the social range. And people do great in those 3 stages. But you take them beyond that, beyond the 12 range, and they have to do something, and they're afraid that they don't want to do that, even though they do the same exact things in all the other stages. But for some reason, you go beyond the 12 foot, and you get nervous, because we are not designed to be those social creatures, even though according to scriptures, that's what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be reaching out to these people above the 12 feet, because those are how we save people. But we only want to save the people we love, like, or deal with. Above that, we don't give a crap, so we don't want to deal with them. And that's where it all comes about. So our physical closeness and our spouses, those we have care for. We love them, we deal with them. But the further away we get from people, the less we care. But God says the opposite. You should love your neighbor as yourself. He's saying you should take those people above 4 feet and love them as if you're 0 feet away. And that makes the whole difference in those kind of situations. In other words, we should value the unestimable as they are esteemed. Then we have, what, that's good. You want
to talk about this?
I can't even see that. What is it, 2 people, 3 people?
Are they in the personal space? No, they're not.
How many people are there?
2,
2.
A man and woman, right? Sitting on a sofa, right? But the distance is telling. What is it telling?
She don't like him.
Well, they're not happy with each other right now. There's tension, right? It is, or it's leading up to it, right? Leading up to that intense fellowship. Yeah. That too. All of those body language things are going on here, and he's trying to make a point, right? He's determined to make his point. Is he going to make his point? Should he maybe wait a little until things calm down and they can come back together and be a little bit more close, right? But we don't do that. We want to make, women are just as bad as men. We want to make our point, right? You got to listen to me. And if your back's to me, it just makes me want to give it all the more, right? And it's not beneficial. So we need to notice these things and be willing to say, you know what? This probably isn't a good time for this conversation. But it's important that you do get back to that conversation and not just sweep it under the rug and thought, well, okay, we dodged a bullet there, we'll just keep going. No, you do want to get back to it. It's an important matter, you want to get back to it. You just don't want to press it at that moment.
Okay, well, I have touch, so
It's
you
touch.
want to go to, okay, well, the next one is touch. I have 22, you want slide 20? Okay, so how, where, and whom we touch all communicates nonverbal communication as well. And touch, as you know, can be loving, it can be comforting, it can be friendly, it can also be angry, it can even be abusive, all with touch. And we have the sensitivity in our fingers to pick up a tiny little thing on the floor, or we have a same kind of power to crush a tin can. So culture plays a big part in how, who, and how we touch different people. So most of us develop our views on touching as we watch, when we were children, how people touch each other. So our growth in seeing how mom and dad touch each other is how we learn how to touch our people that we want to marry or wind up marrying, or how we handle that kind of thing. There are basically two purposes on touching. We touch to affect a person, or we touch to control a person. One of those two ways, and that's slide, oh, you got that, okay. As we're dating or when we get married, it's important that we understand the person that we're dealing with, their view of touching. Some people who have been abused, their view of touching is very different than what we intended. And so we have to be aware of that and who they are and what touch means to them. Some may have grown up in a home where everybody touches everybody, everybody hugs, everybody kisses each other. Other people, not so much. If they've been abused, they don't really like that kind of familiarity. Others grown up in a home where even a little touching is like, no way, get away from me. And both husbands and wives should learn how to touch each other in a way that isn't always perceived as a sexual advance. Some women and some men, when they're dating, they have to understand those limits as well. Putting our arms around each other, stroking their hair, just gently touching can communicate a very positive, non-verbal communication. On the other hand, sometimes not so much.
Touching really can, again, is a very touchy subject because, and that, again, you want to understand where your spouse, how your spouse grew up, because a lot of times we marry the person that's opposite. So somebody from a touchy-feely family could very well marry somebody who came from a family that they didn't touch at all, or they only touched in a way that was to control. And so now they're a little more backwards about any of that contact. So communication through touching also means understanding where that person came from and not misreading it as an affront or as an offense, because you want to hug and they're cringing or trying to get away. So we cannot overemphasize the importance of knowing the person and the background. All right, so the next part of the nonverbal message is eye contact. And eyes are our most expressive features. We probably all heard the saying that the eyes are the windows to the soul, right? And I think there's a lot of truth in that. Looking at somebody's eyes can tell you a lot about them. They can project love, anger, frustration, boredom, tiredness. Every emotion that a human being can experience can be expressed through the eyes. Oculesics is the study of the role of the eyes in nonverbal communication. So, the frequency that somebody is making eye contact, the intensity of the eye contact. Sometimes there might be a little pattern. Well, maybe they're looking at you when you're speaking, but when they're speaking, they're looking off over here in a corner. How often they're blinking their eyes. All of this has been part of the study of the eyes and the role of the eyes in nonverbal communication. When we are interested in something, this is one of the results of the study, we tend to blink less often, all right? When we're interested. The blinking decreases, but the pupils begin to dilate. When we don't like something, our pupils usually constrict. Now, I don't know about you, but you might have to be pretty close to somebody to see if they're dilating or constricting. And most people will look off into one direction when they're trying to remember something. Like they're in the middle of a conversation, they're trying to remember, and they're gazing off. That is a very, very common expression for people who are trying to remember what it is they want to say. But if you're talking to somebody and you've asked them a question and they're kind of looking all over, that usually means they're trying to invent something. They're thinking of, oh, what can I say? Because they don't want to tell you the truth. These are not hard and fast rules, okay? They are just indicators. So we can use our eyes as ways of communicating, or we can use them as weapons. All right. So next one, body movements. Human beings have approximately 70,000 different body movements. Did you know that? And so next week, you will have a test on all 70,000 of them.
I'm down to 40,000.
Well, yeah, the older we get, the less we have, right?
The older you get, the less.
You're right. That's good. Okay. And I can't say this. Kinesics is the interpretation of body movements in nonverbal communication. And experts do disagree, as most experts do, on things, on the interpretation that some specific body movements have. But there are some general guidelines, and that's all we're going to do here. Just get some general guidelines, helpful hints that can help clue you in on the person that's closest to you, your spouse. Now, standing with your hands on the hips can, again, indicate aggressiveness or defiance. Stroking one's chin may indicate you're trying to make a decision. Like, it's just this natural thing when you're trying to decide something that this would be your body movement. Pulling on the ear, like, often signifies you can't make a decision. Start doing this. You really can't decide what decision you need to make. And of course, we tend to lean toward people that we like and lean back from people we don't like. Touching one's nose when speaking can signify lying, doubt, or deception. Talked about some of these, sitting with the legs crossed and bouncing the foot, of course, can be either boredom or impatience, restlessness. The open palms communicate sincerity, openness, sometimes even innocence. Some people stand with their hands clasped in the back. I can't demonstrate it and hold my microphone at the same time. That could indicate an aura of confidence or superiority. All of these things are just one more piece of this person that you are to know. one more piece of how they communicate, how you communicate to them. So we want to be very familiar with our spouse's body movements. The next one is the facial expressions. And they're the easiest to read. And we all have a lot of them, right? A lot of facial expressions. They're the most revealing of all the body movements, and they most vividly express our emotions. So the listener, if you're speaking to your spouse, and your spouse is giving you one of these, that spouse is not hearing what you're saying because, why? When you give this expression, what are you saying with that? This again, exactly. So, exactly. If they didn't hear you the first 100 times, they're definitely not hearing you now either, right? So to keep on with that point you're trying to make isn't going to work. It's only going to lead to more miscommunication, argument, misunderstanding, and on we go as the wheel keeps turning. Many facial expressions are involuntary because they don't take a thought on our part. We just do them naturally. They're involuntary. We don't do anything to control them. Some scientists and psychologists have tried to understand how facial expressions relate to emotions, while some believe that assuming a particular expression can actually create an emotion. Interesting. Early on, some scientists argued that facial expressions were universal, while others believed that they were learned behavior and could vary from culture to culture. But the common belief today is that facial expressions are universal. So you go to a country, you have no idea what their language they're speaking, you can pretty much determine by facial expressions whether they're upset, excited, angry, disappointed. You know, you may not hear the words or understand the words, but you know the context of the communication. They can be spontaneous reactions to a certain stimulus, like, ooh, skunk, right? That was spontaneous. I mean, you smelled it, and you couldn't even stop yourself if you wanted to. And that expresses your true emotions. Ooh. So facial expressions can also be posed. Does that look like a sincere smile? No. Most posed expressions are not sincere looking. Facial expressions are the most potent, obvious forms of nonverbal communication and are more powerful in the marital relationships due to the sensitivities involved. So we need to be careful what expressions we're giving our spouse when they're speaking to us. Maybe it was the 100th time you've heard this, right? But let's not cut off communication by giving them that look. Try to remember, you want to keep it going, right? You want to keep communication going. If it really isn't a good time, just say that. Let's take a break. This isn't a good time. I'm not open to hear that now. However it is you need to communicate that to your partner, you want to do that. Okay. Another very important factor in our marriage relationship, our nonverbal messages have to agree with the verbal ones. Okay? Why? Right. One, it helps prevent confusion. Two, helps prevent mistrust. Like, do they really mean what it is they're saying? Because it doesn't look like it to me. right? And 3, you can doubt sincerity. Those are things you don't want to have in your marital relationship. All right, let's just take a couple minutes here and just go something fun here and see if we can read some of these expressions. Now, why did I put that up there? Has nothing to do with marriage. All warm-blooded animals have expressions. And we know what that means. No, he doesn't like what's going on. He even smells funny, something funny probably. What about this one? Is she open? Why? How can we tell? Her eyes, for one thing, right? The frowning. What else could be going on with her? The head's tilting. What about the lips? Whatever. Or could she be thinking, could she be pouting because she's not getting her way? Could that be it too? See, we don't know her, obviously. So there might be a little more going on than what we originally think. I'm sorry?
I think I raised her.
I know. What about this one?
I think I hired
What
her.
are her eyes saying? What? You've got to be kidding. Sure. Yep. Right. She's done. So if I don't know if she's married, but her husband is continuing to talk and he sees that, is that a wise man? No. Just stop the conversation. Now, we talked about arm crossing. We talked about that is often interpreted as a closed gesture. Would you read her to be closed off right now, to more communication? She's not quite as obvious, is she? Why do we doubt whether she may or may not be closed off to more communication? What's making us doubt it? What about her facial expression? It's telling us that maybe she's not closed off. Yeah, she might be leaning back, you're right. What about the facial expression now? What? What about them? Are they closed off? Okay. Does everybody agree? Okay. Now that's obvious. She's done, right? There we are. Even babies, right? What's this baby thinking? Exactly. What is wrong with you? Well, how many times have we given that to our spouses, right? What about this guy? He has his arms closed. Okay, he looks confident. He is intently staring. Is that an open look? Yeah, well, we don't know him, so we're not sure. It could be that he's just a very confident man, and maybe he is going to be open to what the person's going to say. But you're going to hesitate, aren't you? He could be. Yeah. Okay. What about this couple? They're done. He's done. He is. Exactly. He's done. Oh, you think? She's trying to think. Okay. All right. Okay, so she said something that he's just, okay. He's done listening. There's no sense in her talking anymore, or either one of them. There's no. And that yes, dear, how does that work for you there, Nagid? That yes, dear? No, it doesn't work. No, but you still do it, though, don't you? Yeah. Okay, what about her? Yeah, she has the arms crossed, but obviously her facial expression is belying that closed gesture, right? She's got a nice smile. Her eyes are open and kind of has light in those eyes. She does look attentive. She looks like she can't wait to hear what it is you have to say. She does look comfortable, which is, yeah, what I'm talking about. That's probably her natural stance, like it is for a lot of women. Okay, let's see. Another one. She's probably pretty closed off, right? She's not completely, but might be able to win her over. I don't know. What about this couple? That's an open palm. It said the open palm was an open gesture. That's what I'm, right, not in that case, right? It takes more than just that one gesture to read. Obviously, she's not going to listen to any more of what he's saying. It is pretty aggressive.
Well, open this way is different than open that way.
That's true. It's like, get away from me, right? She's done. She's had it. Probably not. But why are we so stubborn and want to keep on with the communication when we know simply by looking at a picture of two people we don't even know, have never met, never will meet, and know there is no way that communication is going to continue? Why do we, when we're with our spouses, if that would happen, we're at that point, we still want to press it? Why is that?
Because we like Hallmark movies.
We like Hallmark movies?
Yeah, because it always comes out in the end.
Oh.
They kiss.
All right, whatever. It probably is pride. It's stubbornness. We just keep thinking, if we keep pressing our point, they're going to get it. Rather than humbly saying, you know what, let's just back off. Let's just stop this right now. Both go your separate ways. You should be praying separately. And come back together when you can talk and communicate. I think that's allowed. No, well, one more. All right, these two, they're done too, right? They're done. Now, she's done, but is she even tuning in at all what he's saying? She looks to me, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, that she's actually thinking about something totally different. She's in another world right now. She's like, oh, are you there? Are you talking? Really? To me, that's what she looks like. I don't know. Okay, could be. It could be, wow, gee, he said something now. I need to think about this a little bit, you know.
So we consider him to be the pursuer in this picture, and she's the one who's withdrawn. So
Yes.
going to continue after her, she'll hold farther away.
Probably, yeah. Unless he can figure out, know her well enough to either just stop now, or do you need some more time to think about it?
I think she's looking at another guy.
Okay, you're up.
Oh, I'm up. Okay, out of all the research and all the communications, this is probably the hardest thing for us to understand.
Yes.
We all have different personalities.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
What I do?
Nothing. Do you guys need a break now, or? I do. Okay. It might be good just to take a little 5-minute break.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what was going on with their communications.
As she's fleeing in a car while driving away? Wonder what that means.
Yeah, when they get in the car and leave, that tells you something. My water.
It's right here.
Is that mine?
Yeah.
All right, we're all back? Okay. So anyway, I was saying that this next thing is hard to believe, and that is that we all have different personalities. And they've been trying to figure this out for eons. And if you look on the internet for how many different personalities there are, they all seem to be in multiples or divisions of 12 for the 12 tribes. So some say there's 4, some say there's 8, some say there's 36. I believe there's 8 million or 8 trillion because that's how many people are on the planet. I believe everybody has a different personality. So once we understand that everybody has a different personality, once we understand that, we can understand what our own personality is, and then we can understand the person that we're dealing with or talking with, what their personality is. And it's important to keep in mind that not only do we have one personality, but that personality has multiple traits to it, an infinite amount of different traits and idiosyncrasies. But in essence, we all have like basic traits that fall into different categories. And like I said, you know, some of them I've heard of over hundreds of different traits and personalities. But we're going to cover like 4 of them. And usually we're all combinations of these 4. And they're listed on that screen there. They're called socializer, relator, thinker, and director. Now, when I was doing this, the way I learned it in my own mind is I tried to relate that to Scripture. And when you look and see what God wants us to do, He usually wants us to stop, to think, to say, and then to do. So that's usually the same exact thing that these people do. That's our personality traits. Or to stop, think, speak, and then do. So that's the way I remembered it, because I couldn't remember these names. But that's usually what we're doing when we're socializing. And we'll go through these traits. So for the socializer, okay, you do have it. So for the socializer, they have each of these traits and all the sub-traits in between that makes up an individual human being have positive and negative traits. So the positive trait of the socializer is someone who is open and at the same time very direct. They are fast, sometimes they're very spontaneous. They put the focus on the interaction and the relationship with other people. They're socializing, they're thinking, they're going around with society and they're checking everything that's around them. They're thinking their way through life. Their appearance is usually bold and stylish. Their workplace is personal. They tend to be a little cluttered. A cluttered mind is a sign of a socializer. Sometimes stimulating, usually very friendly, very outgoing, and they tend to talk a lot. A good socializer is usually a good salesman, a good talker. It gives them a sense of security. What they fear is boredom. They fear loss of prestige. And they're thinking all this in their mind as they're flitting around the universe. They measure their personal worth by their recognition that they've achieved something. They have a status, number of friends, the kind of attention that draws themselves to people and people to them. If they're religious, then the relationship with their God is important as they socialize. They try to share that with others. their internal motivation is being included in the gang or the part or wherever they are. They want to be part of the team. They want to be involved. They're strong at persuading. They're enthusiastic. They're entertaining. Those are all thoughts of what I call the people who are stopping and checking around, thinking what's going on, and they're stopping first before they actually do anything. The negative traits is their weaknesses are that they tend not to be particularly good when it comes to discipline, when it comes to actually getting to the end of it where they have to do something. They tend to ignore the details and sometimes appear restless. Two of the things that irritate them are routines and perfection. They're not too good on that. They tend to become sarcastic. If you ever met somebody that really could just nail you with a quip, they're under stress. They're not crazy with stress. And sometimes they come across as being superficial. They make fun of a lot of stuff. They make their decisions quickly, spontaneously, rather than thinking. They're not into that second stage yet. What they seek is quick outcomes. They just want to get it done and over with and don't bother me for the rest of it. They want recognition. They want to have fun, but they want things to happen with least amount of problems. And they want to be involved in what is happening, but not have to do anything to make it happen. That's a socializer. So you have the thinkers next. Okay, instead of the relator. Okay. So you want me to go into thinker, or you want to do the relator?
Yeah,
okay.
I'll have the thinker next on that
So
screen.
yeah, this is slate 5. Okay. So the next one we're going to cover is the thinker, instead of the.
They just had a different order here.
Right.
That's all. But
Okay.
I put the slides in the order we were going over them.
Okay. So next one we're going to go over is the thinker. And the thinker, and you have that up. Okay, the thinker. All right. The thinker's positive traits is the thinker is guarded and very indirect. They're slow, they're systematic, and their priority is on the task. A thinker will take as much time as he needs to think to get to the solution. Then they will focus on the process, and their appearance is a little more formal and a little more reserved. And again, don't bother them with the time because they're thinking. Their workplace is usually very structured and very functional. Their source of security is their preparation and their thoroughness. They fear criticism because they're thinking and they're probably not done with their work yet. And they fear embarrassment because, God forbid, if their thinking is wrong, then everything they do is based on their thinking. So if they get criticized, then they think their thinking is bad, and that's very destructive for them. They measure their personal worth by precision and by accuracy and by not being incorrect in their thinking. Their internal motivation is the process, and they love following a very detailed process, and they believe in personal competence. Their strength is planning and organization. Yeah, of course. The negative traits. Their weakness is their tendency to be perfectionism. A bit of hypercritical and slow to make an actual decision because they're always still thinking and still analyzing. Even if they already made a decision, they will rethink it and always think they made a bad decision anyway. Under stress, they tend to withdraw or become very headstrong about the facts and figure out that, well, don't bother me because I'm still thinking about it. I'm still working on it. And so, they never wind up actually making a mistake because they're still working on it. Their decisions are very thorough, well thought out, but then they're always double checking themselves because they're never really done with it. And they're seeking from you a verification or an accuracy, an information, something that they can actually rely on because they're in their minds. They can't rely on anything because they always are still rethinking it. They want to know that they can not only rely on you, but also rely on what you have researched and what you have been thinking, because they can rely on your thinking because they never end their thinking on what you find is the truth, and whatever you want to be speaking on is really about them and what they've been thinking on, so they can trust you more than they can trust themselves. That's the thinker.
One thing you have to keep in mind. One thing you have to keep in mind is that nobody is just all one. We all have some of these characteristics, these traits, but we're going to be more dominant in one, maybe two,
Maybe many.
than the others. Dominant, okay? We'll have some of these. All of us have some of these personality traits, but we're just going to be more dominant one. And it's interesting because, I don't know about you, but I married the opposite. So, and we tend to do that. But we forget that even though each of these have positive traits and negative traits, there isn't anyone that's superior or inferior over the others. They're just there. This is how God made the person you married, or made you. Okay. Next one is the relator. They're also rather open, but I have direct up there. Should be indirect, sorry. I'm not sure what happened to these screens when I saved them. They were not this small, but anyway, all right. They tend to be slow and relaxed in their pace. So if they're married to somebody who is more of an A-type A personality, right there can be, if we let it be, a source of dissension. Their appearance is normally casual. They tend to conform to how people are dressing around them. Their workplace is usually fairly personal and relaxed, kind of friendly. Their priorities are to be compatible and be in deep relationships. That's a priority to the thinker. The relator. They're motivated by involvement. They love to be needed. Now, I would hazard a guess that all of us love to be needed. That's pretty much universal human, pretty much. But with the relator, it's more ingrained in them. That need to be needed is probably more intense than it might be in you or in somebody else. So the idea is that you learn your spouse, learn your fiancé, their strengths, teamwork, listening, and follow through. So if this is your spouse and your spouse is saying, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, you can pretty much count on that spouse following through with X, Y, Z. Weaknesses. They tend to be overly sensitive, and they're kind of slow to start things. They tend not to set really high goals. They're more or less setting incremental goals for themselves rather than high goals. They tend to be irritated by insensitivity, people who are insensitive or impatient, and under stress, they can become very indecisive, somewhat even submissive, in not a positive way. Submission can be positive or negative. And when they make decisions, they don't want to make them with other people. They don't want to be the sole decision maker as much as some other personality traits will. So what they seek is a sense of acceptance. And again, I think that's pretty much a human trait. We all want to be accepted by others. We just do. But with the relator, their need to be accepted is even more intense. Okay. The last one is the director. The director is someone who is guarded, but they're going to be very direct. So in other words, it may be difficult for the director to let you in to things that are personal, but they will be very direct with you on other things. They tend to be fast in the things they do and decisive. Now, their focus is not on relationships so much as it is on getting the task done, getting results. That doesn't mean that the relationships aren't important to them. It's just not their priority, right? They're businesslike, powerful normally. Their workplace tends to be very busy, but it's efficient and structured. They tend to be in charge. They want to be in charge, make the decisions. That's where their security lies. They feel a little insecure sometimes when they're not making the decisions or they're not in charge. So what they fear, though, is wasting time. They don't want to waste time, and they don't want to be taken advantage of. So both of those things are difficult for the director personality to handle. They like results and making progress. If they know that they're making progress, that helps them feel secure. Again, they're motivated by winning, being on top. They're rather competitive, being in charge. They like being in leadership, delegating, inspiring others. They're the ones that are going to be, I don't have that up here, but they're the ones that are going to be multitaskers more likely. They have something going on here, something going on here, something going on here, and they can manage it all. But they're probably married to somebody who's very much one thing at a time, and so it's hard for them to imagine how that person can't do more than one thing. But the director, if the director can't handle all the tasks, the director will delegate, but then follow through and make sure the task is making progress or has results. Okay. What are their weaknesses? Tend to be impatient. It comes across as being insensitive. A director doesn't like to be in charge of handling details, even though they know the details of a project are important. They just don't want to be the ones that have to manage those details. They'll look, make sure the details get done. They just don't want to be the ones in charge of those. Their biggest irritation is inefficiency and indecision. So they're probably always trying to think about a more efficient way to do something. Or somebody who's constantly not making a decision about something will bother or irritate the director. It drives them nuts. Unfortunately, when they're under stress, it can be highly critical. Sometimes dictatorial, because they want it done, right? And they're under stress. Maybe it's a timeline, maybe whatever. It's just, maybe it's their own internal stress about getting something done, and now they become highly critical and dictatorial. And their decisions tend to be quick, and they seek the bottom line. So when you're communicating with a director, don't bother the director with all the details, because the director wants to get to the bottom line, because the director's probably already filling in the details himself or herself. Or they want the bottom line, and then they'll come back and ask for details if they need the details. So this is how knowing your spouse's or your fiance's personality is so important in communicating, because sometimes we'll get frustrated with each other, but all we need to understand is that's how God made that person. Unique. They're not like us. So we want to see productivity. Productivity. So that's the director. Understanding how men and women are just different. We talked about that in the very beginning in the one flesh, because our brains are even wired differently. We think differently, right? So just being different genders in of itself can pose an obstacle to communication, good communication, if we let it. If we don't have that understanding, okay, I'm speaking to a woman here, I'm speaking to a man. I'm speaking to a man who is a relator, or I'm speaking to a woman who is a socializer, or whatever the case may be. So I may have to have a little more patience with my own expectations than I would normally. Understanding these things doesn't replace plain old ordinary respect, courtesy, civility. Those always go a long way in smoothing the communication. So what I'm saying is, let's give our spouses some grace. We want it from the Lord. Let's give it to our spouses. They're not like us, purposefully so. Some or too many couples take each other for granted. They don't honor each other with the conversation. We're not honoring each other in that way. And the way we dishonor is by treating them as though they're inferior because they're not thinking the way we're thinking, or they're not reacting in a way we think they should. And we keep, out of pride, stubbornness, whatever it is, trying to press our point home because we think what we have to say is more important than how they are receiving it. That's where the grace comes in. Love, respect, simple courtesy go a long way in keeping marriages fresh and intimate. Remember, all of us are a combination of all the personality types. And frequently, very frequently, the opposites do attract. Probably because we need that peace. A director who is very much a director, very high on the director scale, if you will, needs a socializer, right? To help balance it. Can they drive each other nuts if they let it? Yes. But we're supposed to be operating on a higher plane here, right? The higher plane being scriptural, biblical, being more like Christ. He doesn't get upset and angry with us because we're not producing results fast enough. We're not making a decision fast enough, whatever it may be. Instead of being irritated about the differences between us, we need to learn to appreciate them. And I know that's easy in the early years. Oh, we're so much in love, and oh, isn't that great? Isn't what you're doing really cute and adorable? And all of that's going on. But we're talking enduring for a lifetime. And I'm using that word specifically, enduring, right? And that means that we have to change ourselves. Because we are to love our spouse more than we love ourselves. And be willing to make those changes, if, or at least use the information that Adonai gives us in his word and what we've learned just being members of society, and treating our spouses, honoring them with our conversation. We need our spouses. We talked about that in One Flesh. They are our helpmate. We need them. And once communication breaks down, everything else tumbles. So let's just close up here with a couple of scriptures to keep in mind. And it's only a few. There's a lot of them, but I just picked out a few. To remember, 1 Corinthians 15:10. But by God's grace, I am what I am. Now, let's hold on that for a second. We are what we are, and Adonai loves us and he's chosen us, but he doesn't want us to stay that way. So if we're doing something that is negative in our marriage relationship and is causing a problem, we need to be willing to change that. Allow the Holy Spirit to change. Pray to change. His grace towards me was not in vain. On the contrary, this is Rabbi Shaul speaking here, I have worked harder than all of them, although it was not I, but the grace of God with me. Let's remember it. But for the grace of God, our whole situation could be a whole lot worse. And really, you only get out of something what you put into it. I mean, the marriage has to be the primary relationship after God. Primary. And there's a gazillion ways we can indicate to our spouses they're special. Even after 30, 40, 50 years of marriage, it's important that we still continue that. Because once that all breaks down, then everything falls apart. I don't know if you'd be surprised or not, but you might be surprised at how many couples get divorced after 40 years of marriage. And you're thinking, man, you lasted that long. Why but they do. A lot more often than you think. Psalm 139:14. I thank you because I am awesomely made. Remember this about your spouse. Your spouse is awesomely made, wonderfully. Your works are wonders. I know this very well. No, your spouse isn't perfect, but neither are you. We're not. Romans 12:4. For just as there are many parts that compose one body, but the parts don't all have the same function. Talked about that too. Husband and wife have different functions in the marital relationship. We're going to be talking about that a little bit more next week. So there are many of us, and in union with the Messiah, we comprise one body, one flesh. But the parts don't have all the same functions. We are different, and that's okay. We need to pray for each other. Pray for ourselves. Verse 5. So there are many of us, and in union with the Messiah, we comprise one body, but each of us belonging to the others. Verse 6. But we have gifts. Okay, your spouse has certain gifts. Your spouse's personality, your spouse's background, culture, everything has added to what that person is today that you fell in love with at one point in time. That's what we need to remember. We have gifts that differ and which are meant to be used according to the grace that has been given to us. If we can remember how much grace the good Lord has given us, and he's asking us to show that to one another. None of these personality traits is superior over another. They all have positives and negative aspects to them. And some of them can be over the top. But when we have the Holy Spirit and we're submitted to the Holy Spirit and we know that we have this issue or this problem or this weakness, we can seek the Holy Spirit's help in changing and improving that. Not just for ourselves, for our spouse, but also for the Lord. Remember, he loves us where we are, but he doesn't keep us there. He wants us to grow. And if we're not, if we're stuck somewhere in the same patterns over and over again, we may want to be thinking about this relationship, right? Is this in order? Because if this isn't, there's no way the horizontal relationship is going to be in order either. So keep all these factors in mind. Any questions, comments? I just want to say before we dismiss, you're getting out a little bit earlier today, my husband's going to be gone the next 2 weeks, so I'm going to be teaching. So in order to do that effectively, I'm changing the order of the lessons. So next week, instead of intimacy, it's going to be on submission. And then the following week is going to be on conflict resolution, which was supposed to be the last class. So when Mike gets back, we'll pick up with intimacy and the finances, the budgeting and the investing. Okay? Did you want to say something? You have your mic.
I do?
Mike?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yes, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. Do you think people should be looking for somebody with the same personality? I know we have different types of personalities. We have the thinker, the director, the relator, and the socializer. So do you think people who are looking for a partner, should they think about somebody who has kind of like the same personality, a different personality? Or should we not even be focusing on just looking for a partner and just be focused on the Lord and He'll provide for you?
I think you answered your own question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, let me go back a step. This course was designed basically for pre-marriage, not marriage. We revamped it to talk to marriage people because they requested it. But it was for pre-marriage people. And the gist of this course was to prepare people for marriage, right? So the idea of this course was to make sure they have found the right person. Most of the people in the class never made it to the end of the class because they were finding out they didn't choose wisely because they were either unequally yoked or because through the classes they realized they didn't understand covenant, they didn't understand God's plan.
Or they just didn't want any
ABC,
part of it.
Or they wanted no part of it. And so they found out they really weren't looking for a godly marriage, the way God had set it up. So to answer your question, I think you need to find somebody that God has, you think God would recognize as a proper help meet, if you understand what that means in Scripture, like Eve was for Adam, designed by God for him. So I don't know if you were around the first lessons or so. Okay, so if you understand covenant, then you will know, you will have a check in your spirit whether that woman that you find attractive is really what meets the criteria of Scripture. And you will know in your spirit, you'll have what we call checks in your spirit, that she's not really what God wants for you. Even though she's very feminine, very attractive, very persuasive, you'll know that it's not for you. God will lead you. that make sense? So you should be seeking God before you say, I do.
Yeah, and really, when you think about it, if you're married to a person that's just like you, that you are going to knock heads anyway, because you are two different people. And I think marriage is supposed to be a replication of what the relationship between the bride, the believers, and Yeshua, the bridegroom, what that relationship is supposed to be like. So we're supposed to be examples to the world, right? And what good of an example are we really if we're not challenged in any way in our relationships or in ourselves and having to, change something that, really isn't godly, or we want to do that because we love the person enough that we're willing to make this change or whatever it is, as long as it's for a godly reason, of course. So yes, you need to wait for Adonai to bring somebody your way, but it is easy to be deceived. As it just is. And look at the package rather than what's inside, or let the package overrule what you already know is inside, to make excuses for, oh, well, that's okay, that's not too bad, or whatever.
Change her.
Whatever, yeah, or yeah, I'll change her or I'll change him, whatever the case may be. You're already down a wrong road by doing that. So I don't know. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but did that answer your question? Okay. Thank you for asking.
Another point for both you guys is that doesn't negate the material, because all the material is still good, whether you're dating, whether you're engaged, or whether you're married. But what our focus here is what is the marriage molecule. So even if you're not married now, hopefully God will have somebody for you in the future. But that particular molecule is something above and beyond dating, above and beyond engagement. That's when you're married and you do walk down the aisle and say, I do. That's a whole nother level. That's when you not only have a covenant horizontally, that's when both of you, you and the one you choose, has a triangular covenant this way and then another covenant going that way. That's the knowledge miracle. That's the molecule that sets that marriage above and beyond any other covenant. So that's the core of this course. How to do that marriage, not just according to the earth, according to the world, but according to God. And so that's what this course is based on. That's what we teach. But everything in it still works, whether you're kids in a schoolyard, just male-female relationship, communication, understanding the differences, or dating, or engagement, or whatever. Those are still functional. But until the marriage molecule, that's a whole different that's a whole nother level. And that's what the course is based on.
I think the problem is that people really don't know each other very well before they get married.
Right.
And this helps them at least start talking about things they should be talking about.
Right.
And rather than just think, oh, well, yeah, we're attracted to each other, so let's go get married, thinking,
Or let's
well,
live
that
together.
attraction
Yeah.
is going to see them through a lifetime together, and without really knowing much. Now, I know in a lot of cultures they arrange marriages, and they did a lot in biblical times. They arranged marriages, right? But God gave a special blessing for that. He really did. And of course, not all of them were successful, but probably a lot more successful than us just going out trying to find somebody we happen to have some chemistry with, or seems easy to us. Yeah.
So would you say the most important part when you're choosing a partner is make sure you are equally yoked, instead of just rather just look at the outside or how attractive this person
Right.
of utmost importance. But Scripture tells us not to be unequally yoked,
Right.
meaning that we both have, now, somebody might be a little more mature in the Lord, but at least they're both saved. They're both seeking a relationship with God. At least that.
But equally yoked doesn't just mean the same religion. It means believing in the Messiah and a whole other things above just you're the same religion. You can be the same religion and not be following Scripture. You understand? Okay. So we mean equally yoked, meaning following the Scripture in your life.
I'm just going to hand this out. You can do with it, what you want. Most people can self-identify where they are as far as on the personality scale. But sometimes you might be surprised that there's a part, like you might be more of a relator. This is just a real quick little self-evaluation for you to do if you want, or you and your spouse to do. But like I said, most of you at this point in your life know probably where you are, but I'm just giving it to you anyway.
So I have a question for all you guys. If you guys are going to make a team, which of the 4 traits do you want on your team? Okay. What would you do? You would build the skills that they don't have. You would stretch them into spiritual Gumbies.